Donald Trump has had some of the lowest approval ratings in the history of the US. I don't know how it compares, perfectly, but I know a lot of people they've made those claims. But now we have the story from the Daily Mail. Trump's approval rating among likely voters soars to his best in 23 months at 52% after State of the Union address as border wall shutdown talks intensify. So here we go. That number is his highest since March 6, 2017, less than 7 weeks after he took office. It has been even longer since Trump's strongly approve and strongly disapprove numbers weren't underwater. They were even at 39% on Monday. Overall, 47% of likely voters disapprove of Trump's Oval Office performance. That's a low watermark since November 2nd, 2018. The first thing I want to point out, I know Trump supporters are going to be throwing their hands up, hooting and hollering, clapping and cheering, but this is just one poll, and I do have aggregates pulled up. But we'll read through this. I want to point out something very interesting. Following this, so this is the RCP, the Real Clear Politics aggregate. We can see that Rasmussen has Trump at a +5 positive. That's a first. Look at all these negatives. Look at Reuters Ipsos has him at -19. But the aggregate, regardless of whether you think it's good or bad, shows good news for Trump supporters. His approval rating on February 6th, on the 4th, it was 41.1. Then we had the 6th, 40.8. But boom, here we go, 42.4 by the 11th. And his disapproval has gone down about the same. So we can see that just following State of the Union, his approval rating is going up. Now, the Daily Mail is basing this off of Rasmussen. Take it for what it is. I know a lot of people say Rasmussen's biased or whatever, but, we'll read through the story and see what they have to say. Monday's numbers came from surveys conducted during the 3 weekdays following the president's State of the Union address. It's not unusual for presidents to get a polling bump after the high-profile annual address. Trump could use the groundswell now more than ever. A Friday deadline looms for the White House and congressional Democrats to hash out a budget deal to avoid a second government shutdown. Asked what Monday's numbers mean, a senior Democratic House aide confided on background, "I don't know yet if it's horrible, but it sure isn't good." For the Democrats, Trump's approval rating is good for the country. Plain and simple. If people in this country are being unified, if it's above 50% and they like what Trump is saying, these are good things, okay? But I guess if you hate the president, you're going to be upset by these numbers. So they show us this graph, Trump's approval rating since government shutdown. Yes, so the government shutdown hurt Trump. We can see that it took a dip January 14th, but it's up following the State of the Union. This is the strategy. We talked about this. A lot of Trump supporters were saying that Trump lost. He reopened the government. He conceded everything. Democrats won. I don't think it's that simple, right? So there's something I typically refer to as the Chinese finger trap problem. That, when you have a finger trap, you want to pull your fingers out, but that actually makes it tighter. You need to push in, and then your fingers can come free. It's counterintuitive. What I mean by this is that on the surface, when you see Trump concede and say, we're going to open government, we're not going to get anything, everyone only looks at the first layer of what this means. Oh, Trump gave up, period. No, hold on. It could be strategic. It's entirely likely what Trump is trying to do is turn the tides on the Democrats. The reason why he gave in was so that he can say, listen, I offered a compromise, and then finally I said, okay, fine, we'll reopen government, but let's negotiate. And now if the shutdown happens again, whose fault is it? Not Trump's. His approval rating is up. People liked his speech. So where is this going to go? It's going to go to him saying, I compromised. I gave them time. I told you what I was doing, and they wouldn't listen. So whose fault is it now? The principal battle is shaping up, as it was in December, over the president's demand for money to continue construction of a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. Democrats are pledging to yank their purse strings tight, while Trump has an ace up his sleeve, a threat to declare a national emergency and build the wall with existing funds Congress appropriated last year. Trump often cites Rasmussen as a rare example of a trustworthy poll, suggesting others are operated by fake news outlets that are slanted against him. It's actually a really good question. We can take a look at all of these different polls and look at bias. Look at this one. This one's really bad. These are going back in time, by the way. So the aggregate is based off of the end of January until now, and it's the latest. What do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are other polls. The lowest we saw was back in the 21st, 27th from Gallup at -22. I'm not surprised Trump thinks Rasmussen is the only fair one when it shows him in the positives. But there's another thing we ought to look at, and that's Trump's favorability. This is not so much about his job, but more so how do people feel about him. And it's been pretty static. It hasn't deviated too much. We can see here that towards the end of January, okay, so here we go on the 5th. This is the day of the State of the Union. It's actually gone down by 0.1. So again, this is different from approval rating. But taking a look at the approval rating here, and it looks like almost all of the polls that come out are overwhelmingly negative. Now, they mentioned Trump says that Rasmussen is, not fake news, and we can see that, I just had one. Where did it go? Rasmussen has had Trump in the negatives before. So it's not like he's getting overwhelmingly positive results, but they tend to be much more favorable towards him. But let's read on. An average of presidential approval polls maintained by Real Clear Politics now is the president at 42.4%. So hold on. I just want to stop and make sure I reiterate. His approval rating's up, period. Even with all the polls showing that, it's below 50%, Rasmussen now has him above. It's for the first time, actually. Check this out. Rasmussen, as of from the 6th to the 10th, has him at +5, but let's scroll down, and +3 from Rasmussen back in November. So it's been a long time since Trump has gotten a positive rating. And even then, we have in October a tie from Rasmussen, so 50%. It's been pretty negative. And even then, when it's not negative, it's just 50-50 from Rasmussen. So you can see why he likes Rasmussen. It's the only one that actually gives him a positive rating. But let's read on. That suggests he still has a steep hill to climb at a time when most Americans still blame him and congressional Republicans for the shutdown, and Washington is growing skittish about the possibility of a repeat performance Friday night. The most dire polls included in the RCP average belong to Reuters and Quinnipiac, which found last week that just 38% of Americans approve of Trump's work in the White House. There are 3% polls that show a whopping 57% disapproving of the president. Leaders of Congress from both parties, however, consistently fare even worse in national polls. Unlike most broad examples, which draw from all American adults, Rasmussen surveys accept responses only from self-described likely voters. The Rasmussen survey since November has been the only national poll that records the public's assessment of the president's performance every weekday. Gallup ended its competing daily tracking poll last year and now only reports monthly averages. I think it's really important that distinction. If Rasmussen is only polling people who identify as likely voters, I think they're probably showing us better numbers. I do. Keep in mind, even before Trump won in 2016, everybody said he was down, everyone hated him, he was going to lose. So can we really trust polls today that show us the same thing? Most people in this country, I'm sorry, not most people, but there is a large section of people in this country who do not vote. I believe it might be the majority. I'm not entirely sure. They often make the joke that if didn't vote was a candidate, it would win just by extreme margins. So here's the thing. I don't trust most of these polls. I am somewhat partial to the idea of an aggregate, right? The idea that you're putting all these polls together is much better than any of these one individual polls. But when I think about how the polls were so dramatically opposed to Trump before he won, and he won anyway, I'd have to say, if they're showing his approval rating is going up, I think he's on track to win, especially with the Democrats being so fractured. It's kind of, oh man, I'm not entirely confident that Democrats can pull anything off. So that's about it. I think I had, okay, so yes, I did pull up Rasmussen directly to see what they had to say. So this is from today. The Rasmussen Report's daily presidential tracking poll for Monday shows that 52% of likely U.S. voters approve of President Trump's job performance, Trump's highest level of approval since shortly after his inauguration. That's huge. That not only is his rating up following the State of the Union, but that this is the highest since shortly after he was inaugurated. We can see here they compare him to Obama. And actually right now, this is actually really fascinating. It looks like Donald Trump's approval rating is tied with Barack Obama. It looks like it's above. So I guess I can't really see. It's too, I can't really break it down. But it actually looks like we can see the total approval for Obama has been consistently higher than Trump. But then it sort of starts to become even. And there was a big spike that favors Obama. But looks like right now, I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I think it might be too small. No, you can see it. The green line actually goes up. Maybe it's them overlapping. And then we can look here at the approval index. Well, let's just read. I don't want to look too much at the graphs. Some readers wonder how we come up with our job approval ratings for this president, since they often don't show as dramatic a change as some other pollsters do. It depends on how you ask the question and whom you ask. To get a sense of a longer-term job approval trends for the president, Rasmussen reports compiles our tracking data. Oh, okay, I don't care about that. Daily tracking results are collected via telephone surveys of 500 likely voters per night and reported on a 3-day rolling average basis. To reach those who have abandoned traditional landline telephones, Rasmussen Reports uses an online survey tool to interview randomly selected participants from a demographically diverse panel. The margin of sampling error for the full sample of likely voters is plus or minus 2.5 percentage points, with a 95% level of confidence. Results are also compiled on a full week basis and crosstabs. The reason I wanted to read that last part, it's really boring stuff, but it's important because people often say that the average person isn't on the phone anymore. And if that's true, then these polls are probably off. But it looks like Rasmussen does respond to that. So I'll end by saying this. Rasmussen does something dramatically different from everybody else, and their numbers are typically more in favor of Trump. I think that may actually be important here. I do. And with Trump winning in 2016 and the polls being wrong, I'm not going to trust them all entirely right now. Or at least I'll say many of the people polled by everyone else probably not going to vote. And that's what matters. So anyway, stick around. I got one more video coming up in just a few minutes. I will see you then.